Mike Walton. Welcome to A View of the Bay, the show about making a living. If you caught our first episode, then you met Frankie Font Sr., a vendor for Speak Up magazine. Well, today we'll have a talk with Matt Shaw, who founded the magazine in Charlotte, North Carolina, and his father Bill Shaw, who runs it here in Traverse City. We're going to talk about their efforts to form connections between homeless individuals and the society that considers them outcasts.
Speak Up is a street magazine, and street magazines are written by people who are on the streets or vulnerably housed. So every article written in Speak Up Zine, which is distributed here in Traverse City, is written by someone who's experienced homelessness. The main benefit, or a couple of the main benefits from being involved with Speak Up, is that it creates a bridge, a connection opportunity. People who are homeless and who are vulnerably housed oftentimes feel and are treated like they're a different class of citizen. And what Speak Up does is it creates a connection point and a bridge. Every part of Speak Up is about making a connection. So the magazine gives people a voice and allows the public to connect with people through those stories that they wouldn't have met otherwise. And then the way the magazine is distributed, again, that's a connection point, that's a bridge. It's distributed on the streets of Traverse City exclusively by people who have experienced homelessness. So every time they make a sale, every time they meet a new customer, it's a connection point. And, I mean, the underlying thing is they're making money. Every time one of those publications goes out, that's a financial benefit and a financial opportunity from someone who's struggling to survive. There are a lot of homeless services for people in Traverse City and communities all across the country, but what's been missing is that bridge with people in the public and that opportunity for relationships and that opportunity for a voice. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Our negative expectations and stereotypes for homeless people, the fact that the way we communicate is now so technology based, and that's something a lot of people on the streets don't have access to. Another thing that vendors are always really excited about is that they've experienced homelessness themselves, become advocates, because every time they sell one of those publications or distribute one of those publications, they're giving a voice to the people who have written in it. So they're excited and proud of that opportunity to give other people a voice. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about this, is that Speak Up doesn't just give people who are on the streets a voice. It allows those people to give other people on the streets a voice. I think that helping other people find their voice, identify who they are, and communicate that with the world is really fulfilling to people.
I mean, it's okay to have a little bit of an angry voice about things on occasion.
Yeah.
Not that Speak Up should have an angry voice, and that's the thing is that Speak Up magazine by itself is not an angry voice. It's people experiencing homelessness voice.
Yeah.
So it's not my voice. And my voice would be totally different. That's a good thing. It's not my voice.
Yeah, that's there's the pieces that appear in these zines. There's a lot of humility in them. A lot of people taking ownership of their own issues, and it's not what you would expect. Reading something written by homeless people, you'd expect more antagonism and more blame, but really there's a lot of taking ownership. That's what impresses me and makes me so proud of the people we get to connect with and work with.
Yesterday, I told Steve, our pastor, a story about Frank was at the farmer's market, and some guy walked by with his wife, and he said he shouldn't be here. He's New York trash. He said he doesn't belong in a place like this. And Frank just responded, whatever, and it was offensive to him. But what can he do about it? But here's this guy in this high-end farmer's market in a place of power. He's got his pretty girl on his side, and he speaks to this homeless person in such a way. It's Steve's response was, "I want to hit him." it's so wrong, you know, and so our vendors have to deal with some of that. That's tough.
Actually, I think it'd be interesting to publish a page of that in the zine.
Well, I'd like to do a good and bad and ugly, and I'd say, what's the best thing that's happened? You know,
Yeah.
what's the ugly? And
Yeah.
just so people are aware of some of the people, the way they respond. I mean, I think, to this day, I think that one of our vendors has become, he's lost his fire, and that's Chuck.
Yeah.
And it happened very specifically. It happened 2 instances, but very specifically, he had a young gal come up with her friends and just laugh at him and said, "You look like Judd Clampett. Judd Clampett selling a street paper. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard." She started just laughing and pointing at him, and he didn't know what to do. You know, I mean, he was just ridiculed publicly. And so he just walked away. But I mean, it was such a demeaning experience for him that and then he had a business that said, you know, we don't want him here, you know. And so he could have legally stayed there, but he chose to feel like he should just move. And so since that day, Chuck has never had the sales that he had before. And that's a tough, hopefully we can help him overcome that. But he's moved. He's kind of moved out of the fray, and he's kind of in a quieter corner, you know, where he doesn't intersect with as many people. So it's kind of, whether it has anything to do with those 2 instances, but he was selling 30, 40 a day. Suddenly he went down to 3, 4, 8, 10, and he's never come back. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those things are tough. Now we have, not everybody responds. Chuck's, I'm sure, very sensitive, but some people like Frank will respond in a much more, he'll be able to brush it off, and move on.
I think without opportunities like this for people to directly and personally interact with someone that's on the streets, our perception of what a homeless person looks like comes from a place of ignorance, comes from stereotypes, it comes from negative expectations, and that's all undermined and remade through the positive exchanges that people have with Speak Up vendors. Gives a totally different perspective on who that person is. So we go from ignorance to understanding in a very brief period of time.
What I think we should do in the zine is introduce some stories from around the country and around the world, so Traverse City will realize that they're not the only community in this situation. That almost every community in the United States is in the same situation, struggling with the same type of things. Yeah. What are we going to do with our homeless population? And so, we're not an enclave of support for homeless here like people in Traverse City sometimes think. Every community is dealing with the same type of thing. Yeah. Of course, you're dealing with it in Charlotte.
With people who are on the streets, people who are homeless, there's a tendency to want to try to separate ourselves and create some safe distance because they look different, they act different, they have different life experiences and a different way of perceiving society that we do. But whether our community is invaded by a homeless vendor distributing a magazine on the streets or a shelter in our backyard, I think that we, as non-homeless people, we're in a position of power, and we can use that power either to reject or to accept. And so that's our philosophy at Speak Up, is that this creates a connection opportunity, and let's embrace that. The on-the-street connection, that transaction when a magazine exchanges hands, when it goes from the hands of a homeless vendor into someone who's not homeless or hasn't experienced that starts a relationship right there. And all the time we get feedback from people, emails and Facebook posts from people saying, I just met someone who's homeless and it totally changed my perspective of what that population looks like. Tell them that they should be really proud of what they're doing. That happens a lot. That happens all the time. We get emails. We got one email not long ago from the sister of one of the vendors, someone who struggled with addiction for a long time, struggled with depression, and we heard back from his sister saying, it's incredible how he's transformed and how he's seeing himself now as someone who can be successful. So that kind of thing is really inspiring and encouraging to us. Not long ago, I had a vendor come into the office in the Charlotte location, which is where we're headquartered, and he said with surprise, "I sold a magazine to a police officer." So he being someone who's been on the streets for a long time, has kind of had this expectation of antagonism with the police. But what he's found through doing Speak Up is that he's treated totally differently by them, and that he's encouraged, he's congratulated, and yeah, sometimes the cops even buy magazines from Speak Up vendors. So it gives someone who really sees themselves as an outsider a chance to start integrating. There's a risk to doing this. Okay? There's a risk to doing this because we are equipping and encouraging and enabling people who have been on the outskirts of society to start reintegrating in a very kind of in-your-face way. Speak Up vendors are out on the streets. You can't miss them. And so it's been easy to ignore the homeless, but with Speak Up, it's not so easy anymore because you're walking by that individual. And what's awesome is the positive stuff that comes from that. And there's also mistakes. Sometimes vendors get a little too excited. Sometimes they're a little too aggressive. Sometimes they don't communicate very well. But what's really neat is to see the response of the customers when they see someone putting themselves out there and making an effort.
You know, we've had a few people say to us how they're going to use their money to support their habits, and
Yeah.
you know, what are you doing about that? And
Yeah.
you know, people wonder. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and that's part of the risk
Yeah.
of doing this.
I think one of the things that gets people on the streets really excited about Speak Up is that it's open to anyone, and so we're not screening for work history or for a prison record or for freedom from addictions, but our hope and our expectation is that people who are taking advantage of the Speak Up program by becoming magazine distributors or vendors are going to be working toward a healthy, drug-free, addiction-free lifestyle. So we want to produce magazines that give people a voice. We want to equip people to become vendors to distribute them, and we're working to build up a mentorship program, connecting every vendor with someone one-on-one that can encourage them, walk alongside them, and help them to reach for their life goals and become the healthiest person they can be.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, it sounds great. The thing is, you know, when it comes to addictive lifestyle, I mean, that's what society's all about, to make money. They want as addictive a person as they can get, whether they're addicted to gambling or addicted to alcohol or addicted to cigarettes or addicted. So all the things that we hope a Speak Up vendor doesn't do, in some capacity,
Yeah.
we're trying to do it. Well, or somebody else is trying to do it, but we're all involved.
Well, to a large degree, and I've said this before to people at our home base in Charlotte, as a Speak Up vendor, you are called to a higher standard, and sometimes it's a standard that's not fair, because as someone who's representing Speak Up, and people know that when you're involved with Speak Up, you're homeless or you're on the streets, so they're looking at you and judging the homeless community by you. You have an opportunity to present someone who's sloppy, addicted, and rough, or you can change the public perception. So by asking people to reach for a higher standard, it's not fair necessarily to them to have to shed these kind of lifestyle things that everyone else gets to do, but it gives them an opportunity to change the public perception.